self-building.
Okay, welcome City Council. We're here for our Tuesday, October 26th, 2021 work session or visiting session, whatever we want to call it. But this is our work session, and we appreciate our council being here, everyone. We feel saddened today by the Richard Higginson's father passed away suddenly, and we know that has had an impact on him and his family, and we're sorry, Richard, about that. Like I said, my visit with your father and his wife was really special to me a couple of months ago. So anyway, and you have a big family, and I'm sure that's been a very hard day. Anyway, we'll for those who are here, let's start with you, Kate, please.
Kate Bradshaw.
Chris Simonson.
Kendall Harris.
Randy Lewis.
Millie Segura Bar.
Richard Higginson.
Thank you. And those who are in attendance, we appreciate all of you. We appreciate all of you being here. We have some extra people with us today that we don't normally have. And Beth, who's with the commissioner with UTA, we know that she hasn't been in our new digs here, so she looks like she's pretty happy to see what we've done. So the first thing on the agenda, and we started here just a little earlier than normal at 5:30, is the mural art proposed, and we'll turn some time over to Rebecca Hatch.
Great. So I'm sure you've all kind of reviewed a little bit of the information that we sent out, but the Bountiful Davis Art Center was granted a grant of money to be able to do a mural on their building. They're on 100 South is what they're proposing. And it's a really great location where I think some of you have the photos where it shows where we're pointing at. Generally, that uppermost banner part of the building. However, in talking with the executive director of the BDAC, we're looking forward to seeing what artists would come up with in their proposals of what they would do with that space. So we'll see what that would look like. I just wanted to share, there's a little bit of background info in there about murals, just since I know that's been expressed to me before, of how can we get murals to be quality pieces of work that last as long as you can. So I've done some research, and a lot of it just comes from knowing materials, and that's something that we can work with artists with, but it's using the correct materials, and then just understanding that that's part of the beauty of mural artwork, is that over time, in the next, granted, if we use the right materials, it could last, I don't like saying a set of time of date, but from research, it can last a long time. Some of them claim decades. However, I think it is smart just to assume that maybe in a few years there's gonna be touch-ups, or potentially the plan to have an artist completely redo the space in the future. Is just something to be open to. So that's kind of part of the plan of, as long as there's correct materials, it shouldn't fade quickly, it should last a while. So I just wanted to see what kind of questions you may have about that. We're also looking for, the team at the BDAC is prepared with a call for entry, so meaning they ask artists in their network of who would like to show us a proposal, and they turn that in. If there's anything that the city council would have opinions on, or something they'd specifically like to be part of that entry requirement, things like that. So let me know if you have questions about that, or have any thoughts on what we could ask of the artists.
Did the grant from Davis County have any strings attached about it being some Davis County particular theme, or did they leave it wide open?
From my understanding, it's wide open. I do have the director here. It's wide open. Other than, I think we'd all agree that we'd want something that is uplifting to Bountiful City, not about the city, but something uplifting. But it didn't have to be about the county or anything.
Is it just the area? I'm sorry, Kendall, go ahead.
Any kind of requirement or thought on who, like what the pool would be for where the artist would be from, or anything like that, or?
You know, we were kind of leaving the proposal open for the types of artists we'd come with, but maybe I can invite you up if you had thoughts about specific artists. Would you like to share anything like that?
Sure.
Come on up.
Absolutely. So I think what we would like to do is go ahead and put out
a call for proposals. It would have to be obviously a local artist, somebody along the Wasatch Front, because it takes a long time to paint a mural, and it's probably not somebody who is going to want to come up from even St. George and, stay in a hotel for 6 weeks or 2 weeks or however long it takes. So it definitely would be a local, a local artist. As far as sort of the theme of the mural, we have been talking about this, and Randy, you will remember, when we moved into the building, it was even in the very beginning, when I was a very part-time person. I was not super involved in moving into the building. But even then, the city council and also our board were talking about, well, we want a mural on that north side of the building because it's a very prominent side. You can really see it when you're driving down the street, and it's just kind of blah. It doesn't shout art center or this is a really special place. So it's something that's been talked about for a long time, but we've just never had the funding to do it. So as far as theme goes, every time we discuss, oh, well, maybe we would like to see this or that, it kind of always comes back to, okay, but remember, every time we think that, we send out a call for proposals, and what we get back is better than anything we have come up with. So I don't think that we would want to stipulate something. We'll just want to see what we get and then be very discriminating about what is selected, work with Rebecca's group, of course, and then present to the city council for final approval.
Thank
So,
you.
Yes, thank you.
Richard?
Thank you. I think she also summarized that process that we're looking at as well with working with their team and then our advisory board. Sorry, Richard, I think you
Oh,
have
no
a
worries.
question.
Is it just the area between those blue arrows on the proposal?
So you
Or
see on the
right-hand?
wall, there's like a lighter colored stucco and then the darker. That's generally where we were thinking the mural would be in the lighter. However, like I mentioned, we would be interested to see if there's artists that let that be an organic shape and maybe it spills over where we're willing to say that. But that's kind of where the focus of the mural should be at.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And it's like a stucco material on the outside.
I don't know if it's just where I go, but it just seems like they all have to be humpback whales that are just coming out of the water. I don't know. That's what it seems like to me.
There's a
So
humpback whale going
Maybe we can
down
do
Sugar
something
House.
different than that. We probably could.
I do think the council had a no-covered wagon clause in the past on artwork.
Good to know.
If you could- if you
So
could
between
maintain
those
that.
two things,
No
Richard?
covered wagon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got you.
Sure.
Mayor, can I make a comment?
Yes, please, Chris.
Bountiful is the second oldest city, and it was brought about by farming, by land, by taking care of land, by growing crops, by growing trees. I don't really want to lose that image of what our founding fathers had in mind for this particular city. As I mentioned, a humpback whale jumping out of the water is not Bountiful. It needs to tie into the heritage of this city and what Bountiful really meant to those that came here in the beginning to start this second greatest city.
Sure. Now, maybe I'll respond with my ideas for where the Art Advisory Board has been discussing. This won't be, I think, the first mural we would like to propose. This is just, the only mural. It is just the first one. So I know that there's a lot of talk of there's going to be hopefully more murals in our city that could embody that sense of history or show something of historic Bountiful. But I would propose that this specific mural, just because it's more representing also the Bountiful Arts Center, that they are showing that they represent the art for our local area. It might be a little unique to what it's representing. So I would hope to have something that shows that history of Bountiful, but I'd propose to having that maybe as a focus for a certain location in the future is what we'd hope for from the Art Advisory Board. So I'd say, and the next thing that we'd look for is just if there's approval for this location, knowing that as there's a process of proposals, that we'd create a recommendation of the actual art piece that comes to be a final approval or any feedback after at that point from you as a council.
So Rebecca, this is the beginning.
This is the first step, yeah.
Okay. So maybe, Richard, we could start with you. We'll just go right down and see what we feel about taking this step and then the next one.
Eager to see the possibilities.
Same, I'm very excited.
Sounds great.
Yes?
It's a good step forward, but I don't want to lose tradition. I think tradition is important in our lives.
And Kate?
I agree, it's a great step forward. I would say I disagree slightly with my colleague. I do think because this location is our arts and kind of cultural center, that there may be other places closer to our history museum or other places to focus on history, whereas, I'd like to keep the doors fairly wide open for what's proposed, trying to still draw upon something that's about, this place and the people who live here.
Thank you. So Rebecca, I think that you've got your initial marching orders, and Alyssa, huh? So we go to the next step here.
Yeah, we've got the
All right.
BDAC ready to run with those entries.
Yeah,
for
you know,
us,
we're
so-
pretty, to me, that's pretty exciting
Yeah.
thing for the future. So, okay, well, we'll look forward
Yeah,
to
we'll hope to have a quick turnaround, so see
for
you
the
soon.
next step. And I'm suspecting there won't be any humpback whales in it, so, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then Francisco, you're going to talk about birds
I am.
out on the Great Salt Lake, or where?
No, we're going to talk about birds within Bountiful City. So, ready when you are.
Please,
Thank you, Mayor and
time is yours.
and City Council. So, as you recall, we had a work session discussion on September 14th where we talked about bird scooters. And we didn't want to recreate the entire staff report, and that just barely took place just last month. So if you recall, council had four concerns, and we've compiled the responses that were submitted in writing by the Bird Rights Inc. representative, as there were issues with riding on sidewalks. The second one was possible GPS issues. The third one was winter months storing of the bird scooters. And the fourth one was how much latitude we were provided in terms of amending that MOU and what other cities had done. Regarding the first one, as far as we know, Salt Lake City, regarding the first item that council had concerns on September 14th was regarding usage on sidewalks. And as far as we know, Salt Lake City in our state is the only one that prohibited these types of electric dockless scooters within certain areas of downtown. We've further known that bird scooters did not get the contract in Salt Lake City, as Salt Lake City limits their contracts to just 2 companies, I believe, every 18 months. If we wanted to move forward with allowing birds to operate within the city, and if we wanted to move forward with subsequent legislation prohibiting that, we could. That would certainly add additional strains on our police force in our enforcement efforts. Do we have any additional questions about this item?
I have a question, just in general about this item, and I'm just wondering if I could address this to all the council members and staff and the mayor, all of us here. I'm just curious if anyone has had any requests from residents for scooters that you're aware of.
No.
Nope.
Zero.
Thanks.
It's a good question.
And thank you. This is a work session, so please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you don't mind. The next item, moving on, possible GPS issues. They've indicated that they are able to operate in bigger, even more complex cities, and that's how they addressed their the council concern.
Can I, sorry, I didn't realize you were going to go on. Back to, you made the comment about that if we were to require some policing of the riding on sidewalks, that might be a burden on staff and particularly on the police force. One of the MOUs that were included in the packet, I believe it's from Midvales, had a requirement that if scooters are unlawfully parked or inoperable or damaged or abandoned, and they stay there for longer than 72 hours, that they can be impounded, that the scooter company would pay a fee for their storage and an impound fee to have it released, and that, I'm guessing that provision was hoped that that would inspire very active management of the scooters. What are the staff's thoughts on a provision like that, and how much workload that would place on the city staff versus offsetting that burden through any fees that might be charged to pick up and impound the scooters and release the scooters?
Sure. The first item is, well, just to clarify, we gave you the MOU where it had basically no changes to it, which was the Kaysville one, to the more complex operational agreement, which was Midvales. And this is simply on data that was provided to me by Bird. So we obviously couldn't reach out to all cities and say, give me your MOU. So with that said, they did it for Midvale. Midvale requested additional components, and we can certainly do that. As far as the impacts that it would further have in code enforcement, it's to be determined, really, depending on how people utilize the scooters. And just a quick reminder, this would be a one-year trial that could stop at within 30 days from either Bird or the city. So I can't answer your question, but it would certainly be additional impacts on staff.
I think just maybe to add to that a little bit as I'm thinking through the question, I can kind of see two components of enforcement. One would be scooters left in obnoxious places. That burden would probably fall on code enforcement.
Correct.
And based on our current code enforcement process, that would probably just be complaint driven. I don't know, unless you gave us direction, that we would actively be looking around to enforce scooters. We could, and in that case, it would be a matter of identifying the level of service you want, and then we would have our streets crews or whoever looking for out-of-place scooters. The other piece of that I see happening potentially would be the complaints that we might get from people riding scooters on sidewalks, and that enforcement would be done by the police. And that's going to be probably more challenging, because by the time we get the complaint, it's unlikely the people are still going to be around. So I can see realistically a lot of complaints without a lot of ability to really enforce that.
Okay, so am I safe then in interpreting that this clause that kind of piqued my interest in Midvale, while it seems great on paper, probably provides not a lot of actual on-the-ground action that would address the dead bird issue?
It would probably, the burden would probably fall on us to enforce it, and in order to make them enforce it. I think until they saw that we were serious and we were taking their vehicles away, then they probably wouldn't do much. I hate to be pessimistic, but
No, I wanted to fully understand that, because this provision addressed some of the concerns I expressed in the last meeting. But if it's not a realistic provision on our end or on their end, then it kind of doesn't alleviate some of my concerns. And so I wanted to just fully realistically understand whether this was doable.
yeah. I mean, and it's certainly whatever level of service you want us to do, we could do. It would just not be in our, current business model, but we could do it. We could figure it out.
Ready to move on to the next item?
Yes.
Okay. The next item was about hibernation, if you recall. If we could take a 2-month timeout. And Bird responded.
Don't hibernate, they fly south for the
They
winter.
fly south. The storage, I think you called it hibernation last time. But anyways, with that said,
It's migration.
Bird indicated that they are unlikely to move forward with an MOU if we put such clause. And they reiterated how they operate in other cities with harsher winters. That was their response to that. Any comments on this one?
No.
I think if we were really to consider this, then we wouldn't want to consider it right now just right before winter. And so if we consider it at all, I think it would be good to postpone until like spring or whatever, if we're really going to consider it.
I think that we could reduce the months in the trial period. I think that's just how they like to operate as they start with a full year. So, I mean, I know I haven't asked them point blank if we could do a 9-month trial period excluding the winter, but I mean, we could go back and ask them, but I think the answer is going to be we want the data for the whole year. Moving on to the next item, and we are kind of already addressed it. We've attached, we were able to receive, did I say Kaysville early? I'm sorry, I meant the Farmington City's MOU, which was basically no changes to it. They signed simply their boilerplate agreement and moved forward. Syracuse, very similar. We didn't put it on here. It was more, they amended some provisions regarding providing the local fleet manager contact information to the municipality. They added that to the MOU. They added a geofencing timing implementation, which was once the city gives you an area where you had to either slow down or not be able to operate, they had to enact that within 7 days, is what I saw. And then they had basic acknowledgement of possible subsequent law enforcement, which we said, it simply indicated if we change the law later after this agreement, you still have to abide by the law. It was a basic, obvious type of enforcement agreement. It's more of an acknowledgement. And the last item that Syracuse had was the timing of the termination agreement. They reduced it, I believe, to 15 days instead of 30. That was the only change that you won't find in that Farmington MOU. And then the more complex or different type of agreement was the Midvale one that we were somewhat discussing. Kaysville had no MOU. They simply asked them to apply for a business license. So as far as how they operate, it's all over the range, depending on that specific municipality. The significant impacts, they're to be determined. It's very difficult for us to say these are going to be exactly the issues. And I believe that's why Byrd also likes to move forward with the 1-year trial. Our recommendation is that council may decide to move forward. If you decide not to pursue it or to say thank you, but we're not interested at this time, we're also okay with that same action. Byrd is not too happy with our neutral recommendation to you, as they would indeed like to operate with their submitted MOU, but they'll be more than happy to look at any other components that we may want to add, look at, or perhaps you want more information to make a decision. So the attachments here in the staff report were the same initial MOU that we had a first round of red lines. And again, we've placed in here the Farmington and the Midvale operating agreements. I'll be more than happy to answer any other questions. This is what we have. Moving forward with the proposal with based on any direction that you may provide tonight, request more information, or simply and respectfully declining the request at this time, and perhaps it could come back in the future.
Please, yeah.
Oh,
No, you're good, you're
rock,
good, and then
paper,
Richard.
scissors?
And then Richard.
I'm okay holding off on signing anything at this point. I don't necessarily see the need in our city. It's not as though we're a big tourist destination. So my recommendation or my vote would be to hold off and respectfully decline for the time being.
Pretty undecided until the last couple of days visiting with some members of my family. We talked about our experience with these scooters in Seattle and in Portland. And it seems Portland, I think, has less restrictive geofencing than Seattle does. But people who are trying to use these for legitimate transportation typically ride these scooters to the limit that they can go on against that geofence. And then the scooters collect there in a big pile. And yet, it doesn't seem that coming the other direction, that the scooters get used back into the pool. It seems that they just collect on the perimeter, and then it would be a hassle. Additionally, we don't necessarily have, the other way these typically get used, I think, is people rent them in a certain area and they just ride them around downtown, or they ride them around a shopping area or whatever. You know, downtown may be that, and it might work okay, except for the fact that we have this new town square that we kind of want to take care of. And I really don't want to see a bunch of these scooters cluttering and crowding the patrons of our town square. I just don't think they fit here. And I think they would, people that are downtown that needed to get somewhere else would use them to the extremities of the Old Fort boundaries, and there they would collect, and nobody's going to stop coming from another part of town to pick up their lime or their bird at the perimeter of downtown and ride them back into the area. It's just not going to happen. So I'm okay not.
I like hearing about that experience. It makes me wonder if, I'm guessing, do you think that they have some kind of system where their employees are then bringing them back because they're left on the perimeter and then they?
Probably, but it sure doesn't happen as quickly as they collect there in large groups.
Have any of you ever heard of like a storage place where they're kind of like the bikes that you rent and then you have to take them to a station where they're stored?
That's why I was asking about that provision in the Midvale contract, quite frankly, because my experience working downtown, in downtown Salt Lake, where they have the scooters and have used them to sometimes go to meetings downtown, and I have found that they collect in certain areas, and then they don't, when you need one, there's never one around, and then there's, 10 of them at a certain point. Those that are broken end up being stuck in certain places for a long time, in my experience. And in the winter, they end up perched awkwardly on the snow piles as they're pushed against the corners and things like that. And so that's why I was very interested in that Midvale provision about how you could make sure they didn't hang out too long for a 72-hour period, and we're incentivizing the company to redistribute them and pick them up and move them and maintain them. And it sounded like that becomes really burdensome on staff, and to reach a level where we charge an impound fee or something to operate, it doesn't pencil.
And if I could go over that fleet manager, whenever that bird doesn't move for, I believe it's 6 hours, he or she gets a notification on their phone. How effective that is, it depends how motivated that fleet manager really is. So I'm not trying to defend it in any way, shape, or form. That's how it was explained to me, that it would nudge that fleet manager to say, you need to do something about that scooter.
Is the fleet manager local, or might they have like in
It's
Bountiful, or would
supposed to
they
be.
have all of Davis County?
It's supposed to be a local manager, but I believe it would be someone that would be based out of Salt Lake City. It's what it would most likely be.
So Kendall, what would your recommendation be?
I agree with Millie and Richard. I think we don't really have a need. I think we can just hold off for now, and then if we want to explore it in the future, we can.
Thanks. Chris?
Mayor, I don't think the bird fits in our community for all the reasons that were said. We've already had one bird. We don't need another bird.
What was the other bird?
Bountiful
Oh,
Braids.
Chris. Oh, I got you. Okay, there you go. There you go. And finally,
I concur. I could see only a very small, limited application during essentially the summer months in the downtown area, but if they're not willing to accommodate that, then it doesn't feel like it's a fit.
thank you. It seems aesthetically for Bountiful to me that it just doesn't look right here. It doesn't fit right here for me. So you have
I have my direction.
You have your direction?
I do.
That's perfect. Okay.
Council,
Thank you.
if I may just ask then, I think, based on what I'm hearing, if we get applications from other vendors, I think what we would tell them is, if we're interested in the scooter, we'll initiate it from the city council, and we'll just tell other vendors, no, thank you, until the council brings it up. Is that appropriate?
Comfortable with that?
Yeah. Good?
Yep.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Mayor, can I ask
That was,
Mr. Astorga one other question? Francisco, do you think that there's a measurable or a real economic impact to having these available?
No.
Okay, thanks.
that's a great question. Thanks, Richard. Okay. We're really privileged to have our UTA representatives here with us to, I think, to go over some really exciting things. So, Beth, welcome back. Welcome back, and you're, might mention that, kind of mention where you are with the commission now and with the Senate having given you even more years than you've had. Am I correct about that?
That is correct, Mayor. Thank you. For the record, Beth Holbrook, a Utah Transit Authority trustee, and I get the privilege of representing Davis, Weber, and Box Elder counties, although I do have a favorite. You're welcome. And I am here this evening to, well, first, I'll go ahead and take that segue. So this position is actually a 4-year term, and it is, you work directly for the governor at the recommendation of the Senate. And I had the privilege of being re-nominated from all of my respective areas. So that was Davis, Weber, and Box Elder counties. And it was a unanimous support, and it went through the Senate, and I was just confirmed it's only Tuesday. Oh, my goodness. I was confirmed last Wednesday, and that means I'll have another 4-year term and get an opportunity to serve everyone here again. And I'm really looking forward to that. I look at what I do as kind of this connective piece to your discussions that you were having just now about how do you get people around? What does transportation mean? And so I think that these are some of the critical things that all cities are dealing with right now. And I can go on and on, so I apologize in advance, but I love what I'm doing, and so I'm happy to answer any questions at any time. However, I did want to go ahead and introduce 2 wonderful UTA employees who really have done such a tremendous amount for all of the data and background collection that you will see this evening. I do have a presentation. I don't know who's going to run it, but I...
You got it up and going? I do too.
I got both sides covered.
Sweet.
So with that, I'd like to also bring Hal Johnson up and Eric Callison. And you guys have probably seen Hal before. He is a veteran UTA employee who really gets integrated within all of these communities and does an excellent job of having these discussions in terms of projects and what is it that we're going to do to help move people. And then I have Eric Callison here, who's going to talk about our service plan. And before I turn that over to both of them, I'm going to have them come up because we all kind of get really wonky in all of this stuff, and I love it. So again, ask us questions and make Eric work for his money, okay? So make sure you ask him a question or two. Next slide, please. And I'm sorry, I don't know who to turn to ask that question. Oh, thanks, Gary. Okay, I'm sorry. I have to digress. I absolutely have not been in this building since it was remodeled, and I am absolutely adoring this view is incredible.
Snow. Look at the
I know.
snow.
This is like the most perfect photo ever, and I'm sorry I digressed, but if I'm not making eye contact, it's because I'm looking over your heads, okay? So, it's just lovely. Okay, so I know, I do need a tour. One of the things that we are taking a look at as we look at our system overall, we look at Front Runner, our commuter rail system, as kind of the spine of our system. And the things that we want to make sure that we're doing are really critical, and that's moving people to where they need to go. With all of the growth that our area has been experiencing, almost every city has been impacted in some way, even built-out cities like Bountiful. And the thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is we're providing these connective pieces. And Bountiful support has been so critical in this over the years. We really appreciate how much and how integrated the desire is to continue with this model and to develop the bus rapid transit, which is the South Davis, technically it's the Davis-Salt Lake City Connector BRT, which is really a mouthful. We hope to get it a new name soon, but until we get to that time, we're going to go ahead and I believe that this is Eric's first, or is this Hal?
I was just going to make
Oh, Hal's going to make a quick comment. So with that, when we look at our structure overall and we integrate all of these systems that you're going to hear about our bus rapid transit, our core bus route service, which is the 470 and the 455 that come through here, in addition to Front Runner, which I know is a stop in Woods Cross, but very close to Bountiful. All of these things are going to be integrated and continue to be developed based on our growth moving forward. So with that, I will have Hal go ahead and take over, and then I believe Eric is after him, so.
and then I'll come back.
Okay.
Well, good evening. Hal Johnson with UTA. Glad to be here tonight in the beautiful new or revamped City Hall. It's really fantastic. And we're really grateful to have Beth reappointed as our trustee. She's done a fantastic job for UTA. We really appreciate her leadership and hands-on kind of working with us. I did want to mention, and y'all have seen this before, but all the work UTA does is really guided by the long-range plans that are developed by the Wasatch Front Regional Council. So those plans are really our guideposts to figure out our investments in the bus and the rail system going forward. Sorry. And so this is, you can go to the next slide. So the plan from Wasatch Front really helps identify both the investments in transit, active transportation, as well as roadway investments. So I'm going to let Eric talk about our 5-year service plan.
All right, I'm Eric Callison, Manager of Service Planning for UTA. I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. I was on the 470 coming up here, and there was a gentleman, bless his heart, who got on at 2600 South and took about 5 minutes to pay his fare. So that's kind of the world that we live in on the bus sometimes. But I'm here. Sorry, Beth, if I made you nervous by not showing up. But we're very excited for a lot of the improvements that we have in our 5-year service plan. Let me explain to you what you're seeing on the board here. We do have the front runner line that comes down through the middle, as well as the red lines there are the express routes 472 and 473 that come from Ogden down to Salt Lake. And then the blue lines are the routes 455 and 470, and then this oval, or what our consultant referred to as a fuzzy bubble, represents the new UTA on-demand service area that we would like to implement in southern Davis County. That's very similar to the service that we are currently running in South Salt Lake County, in Riverton, Harriman, Draper, Bluffdale, and we're preparing to launch another area on the west side of Salt Lake City in December. And right now this is in our budget for August of next year, August 2022, to implement that in southern Davis County as well for Bountiful, North Salt Lake, and Centerville, West Bountiful. How that works is it's very similar to Uber and Lyft. It is app-based, or you can call in if you don't have a smartphone, and plan a trip from any location within this area to any other location in that area for the base fare of UTA service, which is $250. So you can take that to the grocery store, you can take it to the doctor's office, you can take it to the front runner station or to one of the 455 or 470 bus stops if you're going outside the area. But it's a much more economical alternative and also allows us to provide a lot more coverage, provide some of those east-west connections that a lot of your residents have asked us about being able to provide with transit. And it also gives us a chance to monitor the travel patterns of people taking transit. When you give people the chance to travel absolutely anywhere, they do. When we look at the South Salt Lake County map, I should have given Hal a slide of that now that I think about it, but the map looks like this of all of the trips that people have taken. From basically any corner of Harriman, somebody has taken a trip to somewhere else in the area. And that's an amazing opportunity for nerds like me to study where are people traveling, where do we start seeing desire lines and stronger travel patterns. And that gives us a great business case for implementing future service, as well as just studying out, where we want the service to go in the future. So we're very excited to be able to bring that to South Davis County as well. We've done some modeling with VIA, who's our third-party provider, and they believe that this area will be at least as productive in terms of the number of people riding it as South Salt Lake County. So the competition is on. But we're excited to have that, to be able to continue to study that. So if you go to the next slide, this is a more exact depiction of that area. This is the area that we modeled with our partners at VIA. I also want to talk just briefly about the small area study that we're launching in this area as well. We've been asked by our executive leadership and board of trustees to study transit in various places in our system where there's been a lot of demand for additional services, or where there's kind of been a disconnect between maybe what was requested and what's been provided historically. And South Davis County is part of that. As I mentioned, we do have plans in our 5-year service plan as well for this area, but we wanted to broaden that a little bit and talk with stakeholders and with the communities about what's happening both in the short term, medium term, long term, in terms of the South Davis line, in terms of other service improvements. We just had a kickoff a week ago today with city staff, UDOT, WFRC, and UTA staff. And we kind of outlined that we're going to be doing a study here to look at both the feasibility of our current planned network and possibilities for the short term and long term for these communities in South Davis County. I think the meeting went really well. Lots of people had questions about on-demand service, which is only natural because it is pretty exciting and new. We also kind of outlined the scope of the project, what our next steps are. So we're going to be doing some data gathering with the cities. So those of you that collect data, you'll probably be contacted by me or somebody on my team in the next few weeks. And we're also going to work on some outreach. UDOT, WFRC, WFRC in particular is already doing some outreach through here as part of the RTP process. So we're going to piggyback on that so that we don't give people outreach fatigue, but gather some information, collect some comments, and summarize those as well as part of this study. So that's just getting started, but we should have some nice stuff to show you in a few months as part of this small area study. The RTP is the Regional Transportation Plan. Sorry.
Question, could I?
Yes.
So these on-demand rides, are they going to be provided through a third party like Uber and Lyft, or will UTA have its own folks?
Great question. So right now we are working with VIA, which is a private
VIA.
company. They do both the software side of it and the operations side. So we are partnering with them to do that right now. At some point, we may want to bring it in-house, but right now it's more economical for us to have them do that.
Sure.
In Tooele County, actually, next year, we'll be starting some service that will be run by the county, and we're only paying VIA for the software side. So that is a future option. But right now, it makes more sense for us to let them do the whole operations, and we just partner with them.
What an exciting idea to be able to see where folks want to travel.
It is. It makes me incredibly excited.
Yeah.
In the past, it's always been, well, here's the bus line. Are people using
Exactly.
it or not? But people will say, well, if you put the bus over here, we'd ride it. Well, now we can find that out.
If you think about east-west routes, which is what we have lacked, what a great way to find out where would be the best location to put those.
Yep.
Wow, I'm amazed.
Thank you.
So-
Go ahead, please.
Oh, no, go- do it.
I keep, it's between,
No,
always between you
no.
and Richard. I'm really excited about this, and I know this is an east-west destination, but I just plugged in Target, which I think falls within the parameter of the fuzzy bubble.
Yes, it does.
And, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the flat rate from here to Target for
Yes.
$2.50.
It'd be
And if you were to
$2.50.
do an Uber right now, it'd be $9.92.
Yep.
So I think this is wonderful
It's-
for our
yeah.
residents. I'm really excited about it.
It's very exciting for us to be able to provide that service
Yeah.
at that rate. I should also mention that it is accessible to people in mobility devices as well, which Uber and Lyft aren't always around here, so we're excited to be able to do that. Beth reminded me that it is UTA On Demand by VIA is the name of the product. So you see the vans, they will have the UTA logo and the VIA logo. They're operated by VIA and sponsored by us. Please.
So Eric, because of Wasatch Front Regional Council and UTA and others, it's just been so fun. This has been a while now that we've been talking about this microtransit. And the presentation that you folks did at the Utah League of Cities and Towns did show those spokes, all of those travels, particularly in Draper. It was just so impressive to see hundreds of those lines going all over the place. So this is pretty fun. Just maybe for the council, I know that you mentioned, hey, you could go to the doctor's office. I think it's not meant to be, if you have regular doctor's visits, that you can just demand that you go weekly to a doctor. But I mean, that's what they talked about, that other place. But that sometimes you might have to walk a half a block to catch these. But if you have some physical challenge, you're going to get picked up at your doorstep, basically, at the curbside. Yep. So this east-west real challenge that we have, I mean, it has to do with trails and it has to do certainly with transportation. I just think this is just so fun for the future. I think this is fantastic.
And I'm sorry to jump in front of Eric, who does a fantastic job. But I did want to mention too, thank you for the support. WFRC has been just a key element, and that is, for those who don't know, Wasatch Front Regional Council, and they are the ones who have all of the elected officials in these areas really looking at not just the individual cities, but the region as well, and how we can increase that interconnectivity by looking at, as you know, we call ourselves South Davis in addition to Bountiful City, and that, looking at it from that element is really critical, because you can reach areas and we can take a look at all of this data that we're going to collect. So that's the beauty of VIA, is all of this data is available and we can get it anytime we need it. And that's really going to help us to understand the structure of transportation. And Richard, you mentioned the needs of what our community could see. And this is really going to be a fantastic tool. And there's been a lot of people who've been supportive of this. A lot of mayors in South Davis, I think Mayor Lewis was, Mayor Arvey, Mayor Romney, all of them have really been so supportive of doing this type of project, because one of the things that they recognize is that there are limitations to being so geographically constrained in our system, and having that east-west connection or north-south, or it's somebody who wants to get on, maybe they need to get to the front runner station, and it's a challenge. All of these elements are things that we're going to capture when we do this project. So,
Beth, just a point before you leave.
Yeah.
It seems like in the distant past there was a presentation from you folks that talked about how single fare fees covered about 25% of the cost of transportation. Is that still the case?
So with the pandemic, that's even less.
Really?
So it's really looking around like about 18%, 15 to 18% as a whole. This particular project, we are funding it, but it is somewhat of a revenue source. Obviously, we do charge them the $2.50 for this. But one of the things that we found is that with the increased visibility, if you will, of this type of a service that can really do that first and last mile, which coincidentally, you're having a scooter discussion earlier, sometimes considered a first and last mile, but a little challenging, as you guys have noted. But having this first and last mile discussion really changes the dynamic, because as you guys know, the 470 is on Main Street, the 455 is on Orchard or 4th East. Sometimes those are same elevation, sometimes they're not. In my area, they're not the same, and so that's a huge difference. Even if you're fully mobile and active, it's a bit of a stretch to not to get down, but to get back up. So this is hopefully one of those things. And yes, one of the things that this will also do, in addition to that, is we all know that there's going to be continued growth in this area. Maybe not specifically Bountiful, but all of that growth is going to try to get somewhere on I-15 or other corridors like Highway 89. And if UTA can provide an opportunity to have access to our system it's going to ultimately help some of those transportation bottlenecks that have occurred. And as you also know, I-15 is going to get rebuilt in the next couple, 5, 6 years or something along those lines. And so that's another element as well. But that's a good question. I hope I answered it about the revenue.
You did. In
Yeah.
fact, Millie pulled up just a couple of samples of what it would cost on the other services to take those trips. And it was exactly in line with what $2.50 fee represents to what the costs likely are. So essentially, the data comes free, nerd-friendly data for free. We can all handle that.
Hey,
Kind of exciting.
Hey, one other thing is, how long have they had this service in the south part of Salt Lake County? I mean, I know that I spoke with the Draper mayor, and I kept trying to remember his name.
Mayor Walker.
Yeah, and had a good conversation with him at the Utah League, is that he has been thrilled with it.
It has been one of his best things,
Yeah,
yes.
he has just been thrilled. And how long has he had that?
So that service was started in November of 2019, just prior to the pandemic. And that was originally going to be a pilot program for 1 year, so it would have gone to November of 2020. As you all know, with March of 2020 comes the pandemic and everything was shut down. So we did extend that pilot. And one of the things that we found is that the top 5 locations on that, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, but the top 5 locations of that 4 of them were transit. They were all transit stops. It was either a track stop or a front runner stop. And what we ultimately found, and again, Eric could probably jump in, is that we were looking at some of our flex routes. And the flex route is basically a route that deviates slightly, if you needed to, in that same location as we did the microtransit. And what we found is that the microtransit can cover this in a way that really adds to that connectivity piece. So, for instance, we ultimately, I think we extended the pilot for another 6 months, is that correct?
Until August of
Yeah,
2021.
until August of 2021. And so almost another year. And then in August of 2021, on just our past change day, we decided to implement it in full, and we took out the flex routes. So we obviously did communications to let those people know who still rode those flex routes. But one of the things we did in the pandemic is we suspended some routes for lack of ridership at that time. And of course, a pandemic, that's kind of what you would expect. So I hope that helps. But yeah, Mayor Walker and I think most all the mayors in that area, Mayor Ramsey of South Jordan, so happy and thrilled with how this has all turned out, that they're very excited to be supportive of this moving
And
forward.
this changes some of the best routes as well, or eliminates, it has the possibility of eliminating some bus routes. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
Go ahead.
So there have historically been some peak hour, rush hour only routes, commuter routes in this region. 460, 461, 462, 463, 471, but who's counting? But they, when the pandemic began, the ridership on those routes was reduced almost to zero. We had daily totals of 4 boardings, on some days. And so we suspended those services and really sparked a conversation. And I'm going to brag about Beth and the Board of Trustees for a second, because when we proposed some really bold ideas during the pandemic, they've been very supportive. But those routes only ran 3 trips a day each way, and they only went to downtown Salt Lake. So if you worked at the church office building, they were great. But anywhere else, you had to make other connections somewhere. And so the ridership, even before the pandemic, was not great. And so seeing that that market had basically completely evaporated with the pandemic, but that we were trying to shift our focus towards serving more of all of the trips, serving people that don't just work in offices, serving other trips besides just commuting to work and commuting home. This was really a great opportunity to kind of take a step into the darkness, or take a step up, take a leap of faith and say, we could be providing so much better coverage for all of the residents of South Davis County, instead of just, a few commute trips in the morning and in the afternoon. And so, that's a big opportunity for us to say, this service was good while it lasted, but we have an opportunity to do something so much better. And as we study the data, we might adjust, other parts of the system as well, existing routes. We might decide that we need a new route, because all of a sudden so much ridership has sprung up in a particular area, I don't know. The possibilities are thrilling. But it's a very exciting place for us to be.
I would just mention quickly that I've ridden these services before, and they really, truly are Lyft and Uber-like. So you download the app. I rode it in Austin and a couple other places, and picked you up, dropped you off, just like a Uber. In the van we rode in, there was a couple other people in it, but it was as good an experience as a private Lyft or Uber trip. So I think it really is a big upgrade. And I was just going to mention that this was something that when we were kicked off the Davis-Salt Lake Connector project many years ago, we had done a lot of public outreach. We'd done focus groups and polling, and this was something we heard pretty consistently, is this need for east-west mobility and community connectivity. And so this tool didn't exist when we started the study, and so it's fantastic that this has come forward as an option through new technology in the private sector, so we're able to take advantage of that and really benefit the projects we're working on. So you can do the next slide. So just to jump into the Davis-Salt Lake Connector project, give you a quick update on that. This is some of the past studies that have been done on the corridor and route, and so we got some legislative funds a few years ago that we've been using to develop an environmental document for the project, as well as do preliminary design. So we've been moving forward with that effort. We're pretty far along in that process, so you can do the next slide. So what we're working on with the Davis-Salt Lake Connector is we want to build on the successful routes, the 455 and 470. They've been routes for decades in southern Davis County, and so we wanted to build on the success of those projects, improve speed, reliability, make the trips faster from this area to their ultimate destinations. We want to look at the service gaps, which the microtransit helps address, really helps support the growth that's coming in the area, and look at how to do it in a way that's best around those station sites. And then one of our big goals is really to get people out of their cars and onto transit, and be able to make trips they need to make that they otherwise would be driving. One of the things we heard pretty consistently is Front Runner's great, but it doesn't really serve Bountiful because it takes so long to get to it. And so Davis-Salt Lake Connector really is providing faster regional transit where you need it to be able to make those connections to downtown, to the university, and other regional destinations. And then one of the things we heard through the polling and the process is it was really important to have the connection up to the Farmington station. So I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go into the presentation. So this is the routes, the 455, 470 that Eric had mentioned. So combined on those routes, we have about 4,900 boardings on those, and they take a long time. They're about 2-hour run time from Ogden all the way to Salt Lake. And so we're looking, and it's one single bus that makes that trip now. So what we're looking at with the Davis-Salt Lake Connector project is we would break both of those and feed them into the Farmington station, and then we would have the Davis-Salt Lake project that would take people the rest of the way. So if you want to do the next slide. So one of the big key questions we've been working through is the final destination on the project, and that's one of the key things we've been working through with our stakeholders. We heard from the public and we heard from stakeholders really a desire to have the services connect to the University of Utah and Research Park, like the 455 makes that connection. 470 just ends in downtown, so we're trying to take the best of both of those projects. The piece from Bountiful North, so through Centerville and Farmington, what we're looking at with that piece of the project is that would just have stop improvements. We wouldn't have major stations, so we have existing stop locations in those areas. We would be making improvements at those existing stop locations. They would be bus stop improvements, like we've done in the corridor. So we're working to do the design for the piece from Farmington to Centerville. So those would only have stop improvements. The piece in Bountiful and to downtown Salt Lake would have station improvements. So we'd have much bigger stations, much more visible, like the stations we have on our UVX projects. So they would be it would be much more obvious. It would be much more than a bus stop that you would see for that piece of it. So we've got, this shows, I think it's really a great proposal because it gives you the best of all worlds, where you've got the microtransit to provide the first last mile on the circulation. You've got improved, faster regional service that would serve Davis County. And then one of the big questions that we're still working through is there's a market for transit on Orchard Drive, as Beth talked about. And so the red route or the dash route that's shown is a proposal that we're working to do with as part of the project. So you would have service that would be able to connect from the Woods Cross Station, connect to the hospital, and then that would go down 300 West into Salt Lake City. So you'd actually have new single-seat destinations. So if you're going to the university, you'd be able to connect the Davis-Salt Lake, and the red route would connect into the 300 West corridor in Salt Lake. So it provides a really another additional connection between Salt Lake City and southern Davis County. Go ahead if you want to do the next slide. Beth, did you want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
On your second bullet, you mentioned Fifth South, and it triggered something that it may not be an exact fit, but since we've got you here, I wanted to mention it. I did a walking audit with UDOT yesterday of Fifth South, and we noticed an interesting thing as we were walking Fifth South and the front runner station that is, I don't even know what south that would be, 750
It's like 750
south.
Yeah.
Which is actually not in our fair city, but it probably services some of our residents. There has become a community shortcut along the Holly Frontier private driveway and fence, and some industrious person has actually laid plywood for this cut through in inclement weather, which it was yesterday, and that connection from Fifth South and that front runner station is clearly a gap we're missing in this component. And so since Fifth South was mentioned and these micro connections, that was something I thought I'd just flag for you, that we're missing some ability for people who need to get to Fifth South for the next step of their journey from that station without having to do a very circuitous route from where the front runner station is.
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective, because that's exactly what we have been finding too, is that although it's great that they found this opportunity to walk through the refineries, it's probably not the safest route. And so structurally, what we would like to do is we would like to enhance that in a safe way. And we think the microtransit will also give us a feel for the number of riders that we could potentially get on that west side, or maybe, just a little further north or south of that particular front runner stop. As you know, again, I-15 is going to have a rebuild in the South Davis area, and Fifth South is one of those. And so when we are talking to UDOT as well, that's the discussion piece, is when we look at these transportation corridors like Fifth South, 2600 South, one of the things that is really critical is that these are as accessible as possible for transit. One of the things to think about is that if you're doing these types of things, having these diamond curves, those are a challenge, and other elements that they can take a look at to really help us and help them as well as UDOT to really understand and navigate transportation in a more efficient way. So, but thank you for talking about that, and I'm glad that you are on that tour as well. So I think it's helpful.
Hey, how often are these buses running for BRT? They're pretty quick.
Yeah, so the buses would be a minimum of every 15 minutes and potentially more depending on the ridership, but 15-minute frequencies, both directions, would have typically, we would say 12 hours worth of that service, so long duration of 15-minute service. So it provide a lot of opportunities for people to both kind of connect within the community and get to destinations to the north and the south. The one piece, I'm sorry if you wouldn't mind going back to the next slide. So the yellow segment on the map, we're having some additional discussion at our policy committee. So that's been identified as exclusive lanes, and so we're still sorting through some issues on that with our policy committee. So we're trying to organize a meeting in December with that group to talk through that in a little bit more detail.
Hal, could I ask a couple of, let me put it a different way. Can you clear up a few rumors at this point?
No light rail?
Is there any rail anywhere involved with this?
Yes, please.
For the record, there is absolutely zero rail in this project.
Okay.
Just in case there's any confusion, 0%.
Okay, thank you. Second one is related to the exclusive bus lanes. Where specifically are you looking right now or considering exclusive bus lanes? And more importantly, are you talking about taking right-of-way in the downtowns of any cities in South Davis County to provide exclusive bus lanes?
That's a great question. I'll talk about the second half, and Hal will talk about the first, because I roughly know the address of where that dedicated could start. As far as talking about any types of taking any properties in terms of an expansion for the Davis Salt Lake City connector, that's not the intention of this. This route is really designed to create increased connectivity, and to increase connectivity to the east side of the entire geographical area. We don't intend to take houses or do some structural land use or zoning changes, because number one, that we can't do that anyway. But also, we really want, based on our public data, we wanted that connectivity piece all the way to Farmington, because that was one of the critical questions that a lot of people in the public settings asked us. They want to get to Farmington. They wanted, that Farmington has a bit of a job location area. They have their own, they have Farmington Station. They have a lot of things that are drawing people. And that was a connection piece to that. But there's not any intention of really taking up right-of-way or taking any other projects. We wanted to work with the communities to increase the connectivity. Where there is a wider road, Highway 89 between 2600 and then all the way to through North Salt Lake, that's the piece that we're looking at. And that has a wide enough lane that we wouldn't be impeding traffic, but still taking advantage of a potential dedicated lane, which can increase frequency. With that, I'll have Hal answer the specific date or location.
So the dedicated lane we've been looking at would all be within North Salt Lake. So there wouldn't be any dedicated lane in the Bountiful section. So that's something that we're going to talk with more at our policy committee about, and kind of.
Any dedicated lanes you're looking north of Bountiful?
No.
Anywhere?
No, it's just the station and stop improvements. So no dedicated lanes in that section. Yeah, we get a lot of questions from one of the cities north of here about light rail.
Like right immediately north of here? We get the emails too.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's not in, I mean, I mentioned as we started the presentation, the long-range plan. That really guides our investments. It's not in the long-range plan that's looking out through 2040, 2050 time horizons. So for UTA to move forward, we have to adopt a new long-range plan that would show that, and it's just not there. It's not a wide core, there's not a lot of population there to serve. So we think these bus investments are really will provide the needed service for the long term for the community.
Thanks.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention one more thing for anybody, any resident who maybe has some questions. So Wasatch Front Regional Council, they really work on their Wasatch Choice 2050, which is really delineating all of those transit and transportation projects moving forward. And if you go to WFRC.org, I'm just going to put that out there for everybody. That's really going to tell you basically the maps and the timelines that we adhere to as a transit agency. And those are voted on, again, by all the elected officials within the entire region. So it's really much a regional piece.
So you can do the next slide.
was unexpected.
So just the current things we've been working through, as I mentioned, we hired a consultant, AECom. They've been helping us develop a draft environmental document. So we've got a draft document. We've got engineering documents that have been put together. So you can do the next slide. So the next steps are we've got our policy meeting that we're scheduling to talk through the final details and get a recommendation from a policy committee. Then we'd like to come back to the city councils. We had previously asked Bountiful to adopt the locally preferred alternative for the project, so we'd ask you to re-adopt the locally preferred alternative for the project. And then I try to do this on all my projects that are at this stage. I don't want to do any more studies. We want to start doing. So the next steps are really to raise the local match to be able to chase federal funds for the project. We've run the numbers. We think this project will do well and compete well for federal funds. And so right now the feds are, they kind of go back and forth on this, but it's essentially they're saying you have to provide a 50% local match for the project of locally programmed funds or other resources. So it could be right-of-way donations. They're allowing us to credit funding from Wasatch Front as locally programmed funds. So for Ogden BRT, which is under construction and put together, we had what I call the base hit strategy of being able to collect the local match for that project and put it together. This is a really fantastic time to be able to look for funding at the federal level. If the infrastructure bill that gets passed that's been in the news, there'll be a lot more opportunity to get funding for this project, but they're looking for us to have our local house in order, have our agreement on the project, as well as a local funding package for it. So we recently submitted a request to Wasatch Front to apply for some of their funds. We're fortunate this project's in both Salt Lake County and Davis County, so we can actually apply to more funding sources than just Davis County to be able to do the project. So.
And based on what is in South Salt Lake County, do we have an idea of the cost of the total project for South Davis? We're talking about the 50% match, just so I can tuck that away in my brain.
That's a good question. So physically, the project's almost 50-50 between Davis and Salt Lake. And so it's pretty close to that 50-50 as far as the length.
25 and 25.
25 and 25, and what is the total, projected total cost?
Oh, total cost. So without the dedicated lanes, we're in the $75 million, $80 million range. With the dedicated lanes, it's in the 150 or so range.
Thank you very much.
So I think that's our last.
That's our presentation.
That's our last slide.
So, really quick, just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to present to you this evening. We know that there had been some questions, and we wanted to make sure that there's really good data out there. And the more that we get an opportunity, the more that we hopefully can get the right information out. So with that, again, any questions you have, please feel free to reach out to me or to Hal or anyone on UTA staff. We were more than happy to get you the data that you need. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here. It is so cool to be here. Sorry, personal note.
Hey, Beth.
Thank you.
So Beth, can we just ask if there's any other questions or
Oh,
comments?
absolutely.
From, anything?
Great presentation. Loved it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hey, Eric and Hal and blessed Beth, you used to be right here. Used to be right here by me. So anyway, we're really happy that you came because these are fun projects and these are really useful projects for us in the future. And I'm excited. I'm excited for Bountiful for that. So thanks all of you for coming.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for your time tonight. We really appreciate working with you and as well as the staff of Bountiful City, Gary and Francisco. You guys they're great and really helpful for
Thanks,
us.
Al.
So, thanks.
Okay. Well, with that, we'll, council, if there's nothing else, we'll take a little break.